Now we can,
We're good.
and you're recording, so you'll have it.
Yep.
Okay. All right, so I will open the meeting at 6:32. First thing we've got is approval of the previous minutes. And what minutes was that, Jacqueline? The monthly?
They're right,
I don't have
right by
it.
Key State, way out there.
Is it- oh.
12.
Yeah, the minutes of the July 12th meeting. I know that Ashley got them out, Jacqueline got them out to us ahead of time. I hope everybody's had a chance to read them. If you have any, I'll entertain a motion to accept the minutes as presented.
So moved.
I have a motion.
I think I have to, I don't think I was present. I think I have
Okay.
to abstain.
You can still second and then just abstain from the vote.
Sure.
I wasn't present either.
Right. All right, but I do have a motion and a second.
Yeah, I'll second.
Okay. Any discussion amongst the three of us? Two of us? You got any problem with it?
I'm good.
Okay.
Very good.
All those in favor, please say yes.
Yes.
Opposed, say no. Abstentions? I have two. Got that, Jacqueline?
2 abstains.
So we have a quorum to open meeting, but we don't have a quorum to vote on a motion for the minutes. That's kind of,
Fun.
Just that one. I'm back in the game now.
all right. All right, well, then just write abstain
Yeah.
next to your name and then pass them on. All right. So, first thing we have on the agenda is a review of the updated capital budget. For that, I'll turn it over to Ashley and Andrew.
So it depends on how you wanna look at it. It's in both forms. It's in the town meeting warrant, obviously like the warrant format, or it's on your, there's a spreadsheet. The only thing with the spreadsheet, still has the fire station on there. That's the only difference, but with the board vote last week, I think we're gonna side table the fire station kind of for now.
That's what you got out of the Board of Selectmen's meeting?
Yeah.
Yeah, so one thing
We had
that
a
did
back
wanna-
plan.
Yeah, so one thing we did want to talk to, because of that discussion, we didn't really get back to, was kind of funding and strategy moving forward. It was kind of just talking about the full project and the project as a whole, as to whether or not to put it on for the October town meeting and then like a November exclusion ballot. One thing that we didn't really get a chance to discuss, and figured that we might want to talk about here, rather than having the project sit stagnant for the next 6 months, while we, just update the numbers and hope that we were able to get a successful vote in May, do we want to put money that we had identified coming from free cash at this meeting to fund essentially schematic design, so that way, at least bring in a owner's project manager on board, just so that way we continue to move that project forward and potentially have a more accurate price if we're going to actually delay the 6 months. So just looking back at how we had handled the public safety building in the past, we had taken that vote a year before the construction vote. I think it was $625,000 was allocated for that purpose. We were thinking somewhere along the lines of $500,000 for this project. We had identified $1 million originally from free cash, which maybe at least keep the project moving forward, not sit on our hands for the next 6 months, but be able to use that to, again, tweak those plans, make sure that they are as accurate as possible, and have a better discussion when we do get to May.
We're gonna wind up in the same position, though, as the public safety building, and that we expended X amount of dollars, and then,
That's not our hope. We hope that by
Yeah.
May, we have a better number, because it's kind of what we did with the public safety building. We went and got design, up to design phase, and then we voted the project, approved the project, went for the debt exclusion, that failed, and then we spent that 1.4 million to get them to construction, or up to bid.
Yeah, right.
So you would still need that extra, the design just gets you to the design phase, but you still need the money to get you to go out to bid, so you would still have another step after that.
Yeah.
Whereas if we waited these next 6 months until May, now you're still another 6 months behind. So while we're here now, we figured at least it gets us a step in the right direction, so you're not putting yourself another 6 months back.
your suggestion is $500,000.
Well, so we're gonna spend 400 from free cash, then we have 100,000 from the Casella money that we had gotten a couple years ago. for a town building, we have $100,000 there.
Yep.
So we're thinking of taking 100 from there, 400 from free cash to get us the 500,000 to hopefully get design and an OPM hired.
So this money's coming out of your pay down funding sources on your proposal?
Right.
Correct. So we wouldn't be looking for a loan authorization vote. We would only require a majority vote at the meeting.
Right.
But at least get that project going in the right direction.
Right. Because our thought process on it is, everyone knows that we need a fire station, so we need something. So we're hoping that it wouldn't get as much
Yeah, we would be,
as a public safety, but we wouldn't get in the same boat, because we all know that we need something,
Yeah.
so.
So that would be added to the warrant, you're saying?
So, yeah, so if you're looking at the capital plan here, so instead of the $1 million that we have for Fire Station 2, we're just gonna change that million to 4, so that's reflected in your warrant.
Is that in the warrant right now, the million?
Yeah, so if you go to Article 9 at the very end, we did a separate article, and this is pretty much the same article. Oh, and actually, does this not have Article 9?
Yeah,
No.
I didn't see that in there.
Yeah.
Maybe I printed the wrong copy. But we have an Article 9 on the side that we have, if you want to look at it. This is essentially the same, if you want to pass it then. That's similar to the same motion that we took for the public safety building at first, but the only difference is that public safety building at first, we're also purchasing the land next to Masonic. So, that land that's across the street from Masonic Home Road, we purchased that. So if you look back, it was the May 2018 meeting. It was for design, purchasing of the land, and hiring an OPM for the public safety building. And then the following May of 19, we took the vote for the public safety building. So that's kind of, we're thinking doing the same thing just for the fire station, so doing the design and OPM now, and then in May to vote the project.
Okay.
And then I think they almost had like they wanted to go for a debt exclusion vote first and then the project, but
All right, so you don't have a dollar value in here yet. because
So there's,
it's
in the
still
motion,
draft.
there should be, it'd be
400,000.
400,000.
Motion down below?
400,000.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
to take it from free cash.
Okay.
So that's the only difference that's not on, this was our original capital plan from last week.
Well, all right, you're saying from free cash, and yet in that paid down funding, you only had 300. Oh, that was from the MSBA feasibility.
right, that was the money that we had previously authorized to go into the budget
Yeah.
for the MSBA funding from free cash to reallocate that
Okay.
over. I think right now, we probably feel the best approach is to just leave that in there for right now, and potentially either let it close out to free cash at the end of the year, because we won't use it just based off the gymnastics. Yeah, I mean, the other, another project that's kind of on our radar here is the cemetery garage, that they were approved for design, but haven't really gotten into the design phase yet. So they finally brought on an architect to start designing that project. They weren't ready for this town meeting to have a firm number. Their estimate previously was like $250,000 for that building, but we figured that the 300,000 that's in there, we may be able to hold as a reserve, along with the 825,000 in unallocated free cash.
Yeah, I think it's 725.
Yeah, 725, and unallocated free cash that we could consider in the spring, if they are prepared to move forward at that time.
Okay. All right, so that is kind of a question, as I was running numbers and trying to add, okay? You've got 3.2 million in certified free cash. You've allocated all but 700 and
24
something, and
change,
that
yeah.
money just stays unallocated through the entire budget process,
Correct.
through the entire fiscal year until we get to the end of the fiscal year. If you've not, or the Board of Selectmen haven't spent it, or.
Correct.
It then becomes free cash.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then if we don't do that, it's actually 1.7 million, because it has the million added to it from.
So
I have that right?
well, originally what we were
Okay.
planning to do was just taking the whole million, last week when the board said that they didn't want to move forward with it, now we're gonna take the whole million and just dump it into capital stabilization figuring at least we could make some money on it, because obviously it's an investment account, so it would gain some interest on it in the next 6 months. And then come May, we could just take it out of capital stabilization and use it to fund, like, to put towards the fire station. But this would be, so we're gonna change the million, so your packet still has the million. We would change the million, put 600,000 into capital, and then take the 400 and put it towards that fire station OPM and design.
All right, speaking of which, so I like your chart at the end of the warrant.
Yes.
Explain to everybody where the money is. If, the one thing I could ask is that, in that second grouping, where it says stabilization and capital stabilization balance.
Yeah.
If you could separate that.
Okay.
Between what I'll call the basic stabilization.
Yeah.
And then the capital after that.
Yeah.
Because we've all kind of agreed that the capital stabilization is going to be for certain kinds of expenses,
Right.
right?
Just want to see what the differences in this. Oh, on this one.
I want one.
Kind of expenses.
Oh.
I was looking on the sheet, I wasn't looking at
think there
the.
are
Oh,
ideas
this
for
sheet?
motor vehicles, heavy equipment,
He just
fire
wants you to
trucks.
separate out those
Okay, yeah.
Where
balances,
the
yeah. Are they on
in my
here?
mind, Jeremy, the stabilization
Oh, yeah, you have them out
is
separated here.
a major catastrophe.
Yeah, so Andrew has them on the
Something
bottom
that
here,
comes
so
up
I'll
that
put the, when I do the, when we do the warrant, because those numbers are actually gonna
Yeah, the
change a
other
little bit,
stuff,
because
the
we would have
movement
made
is
some interest now in September.
Yeah. It's a
So I'll
cost of
update them a
purchase,
little
yeah.
bit when we post September cash.
You've got stabilization, current stabilization,
Yeah.
Okay, you do have.
So Andrew has them
Yeah, I have
separated
it
out
right.
here, yeah.
Okay.
I wrote them up
I think
here.
it would help at the town meeting
Yeah.
if they could see the difference.
Yep.
Because at some point, you've said, this is coming from capital stabilization.
Right, yeah.
Right? You know, here, we've been promoting stabilization, put money in, and now you're showing some coming out. Well,
Right,
this to me is the revolving stabilization fund, for lack of a better.
right.
Okay,
Yeah, so I'll separate them out for in there.
okay.
So that was really the only change that we had that was different from last week. But if you want to, I guess we can start on page 2 of the warrant. I think it's a little easier to read in here because it's a little bigger. The only thing coming from free cash here, which is on your capital sheet, is our OPEB funding. So we funded 100,000 when we did budget, so the other 150 is to get us to the 250, which is more than we need to fund this year, so that's good. Everything else, well, your next two, so the deputy chief and then the body worn camera software technology are both gonna come from the excess that we have in the Dudley Charlton school budget, because we obviously voted the higher number than what the budget was passed by the school committee. So we're gonna move those $2 amounts for the police department, and then everything else is gonna be for raise and appropriate, because we had extra money from some new growth windfall that we had. We had another, do you remember, was it 2 years ago now, MCI?
It was probably 2 years ago.
Yeah, so we had the same kind of windfall again this year with another company where we had like an unexpected incoming of an increase in new growth, and then and we never budget. We thought we were doing our best budgeting at 1.2 million for new growth, and ended up being more than that, even with Amazon. But a lot of it's because Amazon came in a little higher because they were a little bit further ahead than we thought they were going to be, and then we had a windfall with another property that came in kind of similar how the MCI Communications one did a couple years ago.
Okay.
So we have a little bit excess in new growth that we figured we might as well use. So we can reinstate the stipends since we had some sad people at town meeting. So we figured we would do that, and then we're also gonna fund stabilization. So put some money into capital stabilization there.
All right, just since we're on the stipends, for Christian and Keith, because you weren't there last week, the comment was made that, let's put it back in now, and if we have to do something in May to reduce the budget, we'll take them back out.
Right, at that point, well, you could take them off for FY25, but you can't take them off for 24, because at that point, they would be pretty much all spent.
Right.
You'd have like pennies left in everyone's account. But for FY25, you
So
check.
I
them,
just
you pull
raised the
them back
question,
out.
why are we putting them back in if
Yeah.
we're talking about maybe having to take them out at a later time, right? And did we take them out because we saw it as, I hate to use the word unnecessary expense or frivolous expense? I mean, stipends they have value, okay? They get people to join and serve on a committee. But it was almost like they were using it as a free,
Funny money.
a bargaining chip, okay? We'll
Yeah.
do it now, but, we'll take it. I didn't get that. and then I'm not quite sure that I still agree with putting them back in yet, okay? Has anybody quit a board, I'm curious, because they didn't get a stipend?
None elected officials have resigned their seats because there was no stipend available for it.
Okay. Did any appointed?
No appointment.
Have you not been able-
Nobody on an appointed board
Gets a stipend, yeah.
Okay,
These are only elected official stipends.
okay. Anybody, well, we won't know until May when the elections
Right.
come up again, who's gonna rerun, okay? Whether or not the stipend was that important that they decided to run or not to run. I mean, I just, I'm just throwing it out on the table. If the Board of Selectmen really feels that it's important, then fine, I'll go along with it too. But it just seems to me like it's one hand and doing
What's
this,
the-
the other hand's doing that.
What's the total? I know they're all in here, but what's the total number?
About 27,000?
Yeah, about
It wasn't
40.
much.
30,000?
It was about 45.
Is it that high?
Different numbers.
Oh, I
I
thought
think it was
did
like
a-
36 or so.
I feel like we're wavering on the intent of having them, because it was supposed to be to recruit
It's,
talent, and now we're looking
It's
at it
28.
like, when it's convenient,
yeah.
we don't need it.
Right.
I gotta double check my
And it
spreadsheet.
wasn't part of the decision
Yeah,
for them
'cause
to be
it's selectmen,
removed, but
board of
it was
assessors,
obviously had to
planning,
do with the
cemetery,
school.
board of
Yes.
Right, can
Selectmen.
anybody just speak to
Recreation.
some of the history
Well,
there and just?
Better make
So
sure we're not
we
missing.
needed to come up
Okay.
with another $200,000. We were at 1.7, the school was asking for 1.9. We had
Must
to
maybe
come
I
up
have
with
wrong
200,000. And Andrew sat right there and said, all right, we're gonna come up with 2. And he went through a bunch of 20,000 from here, 8,000 from
Oh,
there.
okay.
There were
Yeah.
probably 10 or 12 items, right?
Yep.
That does.
And
look
even
low
at the
now that
town
you say
meeting,
that.
we got questioned about, well, why did you get rid of this? Well, we tried to make it equitable
Mhm,
across the
okay.
board.
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
this was determined to be one of the places that was most equitable to cut.
Yeah,
right?
the way we looked at it is that since if we would have been in the same, if we would have known about the new growth back in budget season, it probably would have stayed.
Okay,
And since we had somebody bring it up at town meeting, we're like, well, since we have the money, I mean, it doesn't mean that we have to put it on, that was just kind of our thought process. And then, I think there are some people that are concerned about getting people to stay or to come on. It's hard enough to get people to join. So reinstate the stipends, but like Andrew said, we haven't had anybody
Join-
leave,
Join or
but,
run for the seat.
well, right.
I just noticed some of these you have just one position, you don't have all the positions, that's probably why.
Maybe that's
Yeah.
why.
All right.
And I might have been looking at budget too, so
Yeah.
maybe I had
So-
some wrong numbers.
These do need to be tweaked. The total amount for all the stipends, including the Water and Sewer Commission, which comes out of their
Their
the
water
retained
sewer
water
money,
funds,
yeah.
is 48,400 for all of the stipends.
Okay.
Can I ask a different question? It's jumping back to the
Yeah.
police expenses. Just from what we saw last meeting, do you think that there's any sensitivity transferring funds from the DCRSD operating assessment?
So we did this last year because at the time, when we had our town meeting, we had a budget that we agreed to, that we voted on, and we passed the higher budget. After our town meeting is when Dudley's failed.
Right.
Which is when the school committee went back and they decided to lower their number.
Right.
So I think in our mind, we voted a number. If that's not what passed, we have the excess in there so we can move it, because we did the same thing last year.
I just don't want people saying, oh, you're taking it from this school.
Yeah, and I don't know if anyone squawked about it last year, but we're not really taking it from the schools. It's
Right.
the excess because we voted higher.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
if we could give them more, I mean, I'm sure everyone would love to, but
Yeah.
we're held by whatever Dudley does
Dudley
too,
does.
so.
Right.
Not to throw anybody under the bus, but that's just how the agreement works.
Mhm. And just to remind everybody too, that tonight's discussion is about what we think of these warrants. It's
Right.
next Tuesday.
Yeah.
When we meet with the Board of Selectmen, that will say, we're in favor of this, or
Right. I mean, we
not in
can,
favor of
if
this.
you are all in favor of doing it, I can pull it, we have a little excess and raise and appropriate, or we can get rid of the stipends and I can just raise and appropriate it instead of taking it from the school. The only thing that's gonna happen with the school money, it just closes and it becomes excess and free cash, so it's, I mean, to me, it's really the same money, cause it's all still taxpayer money, so.
And I get that. I'm just trying to anticipate this.
Yeah.
moment.
And I mean, it doesn't mean that they won't, but last year, and we did the same thing, we transferred money into there, we had a little bit more excess last year, I wanna say we had like 200,000, 220 last year.
Yeah.
And I know we moved some out, so.
Okay. I mean, we can keep talking about this, or let's go through it, and then we can come
Yeah.
back if we want to.
So the next article is, just the amendment to the sewer budget, that's also to increase their water budget, or sorry, the sewer budget to give them, to increase their portion of the stipends, because the water and sewer commission's one commission, but their money's separate. Article 4 is, all your capital items, which are on your little spreadsheet here, but they're just easier to read, obviously, because they're bigger. So I'll start from the beginning. So we have 2 for the selectmen. One of them is open space and recreation, but Andrew has been so kind because our conservation agent left, and the one that's there currently she's by herself, so Andrew's agreed to kind of help out with that. We have to update that plan, or else we're out of compliance. So I think we said we were gonna, CMRPC, I think, is doing it with us.
Yep.
So he'll just be kind of the go-between to get them to update that for us. I believe that's a matching. They pay half and we pay half, or is
No,
that's not matching one?
no, we had applied for a grant, so if we do end up getting a grant that comes in,
That's what it is.
we won't need that fund, it'll be unexpended, we'll be able to turn it back, but we are due to get the plan done, so we always wanna have the money available,
Yeah.
assuming that we don't get the grant for it.
Yeah, because if we don't do it, we're out of compliance. The next one
Well,
is.
One quick
Yep.
point. Chief, I don't want to make you have to sit here. I know you're worried about the deputy. That's why you're here.
Well, I'm worried about the town.
Good answer, good answer.
And most importantly, yes.
Is that deputy. Well, let's just go back to that. That's item number 2 on this motion. I know personally, I'm for the deputy, and I'm going to ask for, when the time comes that we approve that, all right?
Thank you.
I just, like I said, I didn't want to have you sit here for another hour.
I know Keith will disappoint me, but,
Yeah,
He
but
was hoping you'd hire him, he
But-
told me.
he's going to be in Tennessee.
good point.
Doesn't matter to me.
Okay, I'm sorry.
No, you're okay. The grant fund matching is, we used to have an account that had a little bit of money left in it. Basically, when we go out for grants, there are some grants that require us to fund a match. It's hard for us to do that when we don't have money, so we created this. It'll be a line that would just be for grants that we apply for that require us to have the funds to match it, to be able to get this one. Specifically, there was one that Andrew and his office had went out for the number 2 schoolhouse. It was to, update and do all the historical, so you obviously you're still under historical compliance, but update all that, but we needed funds to match. So we couldn't apply for the grant, so it was all set, and then they're like, oh, do you have the funds? And we couldn't match it. So we'll leave this out there, so it'll be for grants like that,
Yeah.
that we, have the funds for. 2 for
And-
municipal.
Excuse me, but that's at your discretion to spend. It's not required of town meeting or,
Correct, yeah.
Once it, right.
But it
once
will be specific for grant
Yeah,
matches,
no,
like you
I
can't
get
put it
that.
on,
I
yeah,
just-
but right,
right.
correct. The next 2 are for, municipal buildings, so one is for the PlayStation HVAC system upgrade, so, I don't know, at first we were gonna redo the whole HVAC system, it was gonna be like over $1 million, but I don't know if I'm giving credit to the chief or to the lieutenant on this one for patching, and they're gonna put some mini splits in the areas, so they have heat and air in the areas where they need it, that will suffice them for the time being.
Did you apply for rebates, chief?
Well, we're trying. $1 million just sounds insane to me,
It is.
so
Yep.
I can't wrap my head around that, so.
that's the down payment on our next
No, I
police
know,
station.
we're looking at alternatives to
Yep.
keep the costs low.
And
It is, the system is as old as the building, so
Yep.
even though the building looks good to drive by, it's 30-plus years old,
Yep.
so we gotta get ahead of it at some point, not maybe this year, but it's coming, it's looming.
the other one is, since we've been updating buildings around town, we've kind of put town hall on hold, and there's some upgrades and some work that needs to be done here to keep our building nice. So there's some things that, I think Andrew and Kurt have been working on to get some things done here. The next one is technology replacements. That's the same article that he gets every year to upkeep all of our technology so we don't fall behind.
Let me
Cemetery,
just say, Jeremy, that's like, as Ashley just said, that's an ongoing. You'll see
Yeah.
that almost every year, because we know, okay, that we've got to be buying new equipment, because
Yeah.
equipment just
we
runs out.
didn't have an IT person for a while. Actually, I don't think they ever had an IT person here, and it's kind of on the back burner, and a lot of our technology has gone kind of out the window, and now since we have a IT director, he makes sure everything is, and I know we have a lot of computers that are out of compliance that won't upgrade to the new Windows 10, Windows 11, Windows 10, one of the two. One of them is, you can't, like, they're on XP and they won't upgrade. So we need to upgrade, so they need all new computers, so he's been buying those, and he buys cameras, and when things are broken, he replaces them, so he usually uses that as a replacement article.
Okay.
Cemetery, he had at first asked for 15,000 for a replacement mower. The mower's from the early 2000s, so that needs to be upgraded. Obviously, they use it every day to mow the cemetery. And talking with him, like a month and a half, maybe 2 months ago now, he got some quotes in for the mower. They came in a lot lower than what he thought they were going to be. So he asked if he could get a ripper tooth for his excavator that he bought last year. So when he goes to dig graves in the winter, he doesn't ruin the bucket, and he can actually get in if there's frost or anything, or if he needs to get through rocks and stuff. So his original ask is still 15, but now it's just split between two items. The Board of Health. So originally, this 370,000 for landfill monitoring was in their budget. So it was voted as part of their expense line. If you look at FY23 to FY24, you see a huge drop in their expense line. That's because I had told him what happens at the end of the fiscal year is he has all this money left over because he doesn't know by the time the bills hit, and he's been using, I don't know what Gary does. I forget. What's his-
Basically the landfill monitor.
Yeah, so he basically goes and like monitors all the landfill. We have paid for a mowing company. We've been paying for PFAS testing. So he needs like a set budget number that doesn't leave, basically. So what happens with budget every year, he loses it. So he needs like a set amount for the state for when he goes to do reporting, that he has money set aside to be able to monitor this landfill. So this is separate, obviously, from that 2 million that we had voted a couple years ago. This is required by the state, for us to just make sure that we're upkeeping that and make sure that we're doing the monitoring out that we need to be doing. So I told him his best bet is to get an article. It's there until he spends it, and then if he needs more, we can come back for more in a couple years. But this should last him, I'd say, at least a couple years. Hopefully get us to cap that landfill. The last two are for library. This 150 for replacing the gutters is addition to the 200,000 that we had given them last year for the same part of the library. Once we hired somebody and brought a company out here and they looked into it, it was in a little bit worse shape, and obviously the cost of everything has just gone up, so they need another 150. That will complete that part of the project. And then next year, we can look at doing the front half of the building. So that will be a whole separate project. So this is just to get them through to replacing the back half of the building.
All of this is to repair and upgrade a new addition.
Oh, yeah, 20-year-old portion of the building. Yeah, so there was an issue essentially when it goes back to the integrated gutter system on the back side of the building. And we had to bring a company in to evaluate that gutter system to figure out if it was best to replace, replicate, put something else into its place, or to redesign it so that it was an exterior gutter system. Essentially, they've devised that they can reuse, the best option is to reuse that. It wouldn't be able to support the exterior gutter the way it's currently designed, but essentially using a membrane in that space to keep it from ever leaking back into the building as it currently is.
Right.
And then also ripping and replacing the roof that's there.
Damaged.
Yeah. And then the other part, and I don't know if you remember me saying last week, Hank, so their fire pond and cistern pipes system that they have behind the library is to fund obviously all their fire suppression in the building. There's a screen in that pond that's ruined that needs to be replaced. So she originally a company was telling her that could almost be double the price. Well, we got a quote in, and it actually is right around that number, so we're good with this number now. So that does need to be done. She had asked for it. She was going to ask to do it in the spring, so she has a company that will hopefully come out and do it for her, and we can get that all fixed.
Just supplies for the fire suppression? Do the fire trucks go down there and pull water out of it for?
So they do have the ability to if needed, but its primary function is to feed the fire suppression system at the library.
Yep.
Yeah, and I think the pond needs to be cleaned, and there's a bunch of stuff that needs to go on over there. So another company, she had a company originally come quote it, and they said it was kind of above their purview, so they wanted somebody else to handle it, and they would do the part of the work that they could do. So she found another company that would work with them, and they gave us a quote, and it's still right around that same number, so hopefully we stay right around there. So there might be an instance where they might have to do a couple things once they get in there, so hopefully I gave her enough cushion. If not, she said we'd figure it out. Moving on to DPW. So originally, if you had looked back at their capital plan before, Jerry retired, I think they had asked for an excavator. With the new DPW superintendent starting, he thinks that they need a skid steer a little bit more than that, because their current one, they use a lot more than the excavator, so they need a additional one, because they feel like they use it more than that, so. We changed their ask to a skid steer, and then they need another sander, so those are their two asks. Police, we have the cruisers, which is normal, the 3 a year, and he recycles them as he can, but he's got lots of details, so, he'll probably phase out old cars and then bring the new cars in if we ever even get the new. Have you gotten your new cars from last year yet?
No.
It's a sore
That's
subject.
11 months at this point, you know, so,
It's gonna be another year with the strike.
yeah. So our hope is that we've got one en route and two shortly thereafter, but we don't have wheels in the parking lot yet. But then if we get cars in the fall, we would immediately order, hopefully, the
They don't-
strike is over and
They don't take 12 months again.
And Jeremy, like that technology, this is something we do every year.
Yeah. They get lots of wear and tear. Yeah.
Three cars.
They get lots of wear and tear on them, and then they're deemed not safe anymore after a certain, so they have to be taken off the road for police pursuit, so they
we
need.
just lost a motor today on a new car, but it's under warranty, so that's one good thing, they're swapping out a motor.
Oh, that's good.
Well, but it's
Hopefully
out of
the-
service for, you know,
Right,
2 weeks. or
right.
Yep.
But at least it's under warranty.
And then the other part was the ask that David asked last week for us to add, Selectman Singer asked us to add that 15,000 in for their tactical gear and for training, or we kinda left it kinda broad so we can buy,
Steel plates
that's
for
what
the
it
range,
was.
I was told, which,
and I think that ends our capital asks. The next article is for our stabilization fund transfers, so like I said, that million is gonna become 600,000 if we can add Articles 9 in. And actually, I might shuffle the order of these, so we can do Article 9 before Article 5, cause if that fails, I can put the money into stabilization. So I'll probably bump
Okay.
that Article 9 you
9
have
to-
up. I was just waiting, I put it kind of as a placeholder to make sure
Yeah,
the
that
selectmen
makes-
are
that
on
makes
board
sense.
next week. I'll bump that before, so if that were to fail, I can put that money, I'll have somebody make a motion on the floor to bump that number up to a
Yep.
million. So at least we can make some money on it. And then we're gonna put the 500,000 into stabilization with free cash, and then sewer wants to put the 1.9 into their sewer retained earnings, or from their sewer retained earnings into stabilization, and then the 150 for water. And then that's really it for money. Everything else is just kinda clean up for, so
Some of
that's
the
it for
other
money
ones do
wise.
say like FinCom supports the motion, are we,
Yeah, I
like,
noticed that.
tree warden?
Yeah, so those are just placeholders. I have to
are
take
they-
all that wording
okay,
out, but that's what we'll
fits.
do at next week's meeting. We'll vote with the selectmen.
We'll decide if we have to
Yeah.
approve it
Oh, okay,
or
that
support
happens
it or
there.
not.
Yep, so
Yeah,
usually
so
anything
we
that
don't
has to
have to-
do
we
with
don't-
money,
That's what I was.
Yeah, we don't have to support every motion, just,
just the
I
ones
was
for money.
wondering why
Yeah.
FinCom was on some of these.
Yeah.
Yeah, so this is still kind of like a
It looks like a
placeholder
placeholder.
warrant, but,
Okay.
yeah, so next week, those will be gone, and then when you vote, I'll update them with what everyone's votes are. So that's kind of it.
Okay.
Hopefully be
So it's all
nice.
pretty much cut and dry, you've explained where it comes from. So the only question is, are we gonna be ready to support Article 1, Article 2? as
Yeah, Article 1 is
presented?
normal for Jeremy, so, and Kristen was here last year, so for Jeremy, Article 1 is a placeholder in every warrant every town meeting that we have, it's just, if we ever had bills from a prior year, and actually this year we have quite a few.
Yep.
Those are just bills that either came in after the fact, or they called us after the fact and said, hey, you forgot to pay this bill. So those will go in, they have to get approved by town meeting for us to pay them, because we're not allowed to pay anything after the end of the fiscal year.
Why does it say to Amazon Business LLC? Is that a refund to them because they overpaid a,
No, we owe them money.
right, that's what I'm saying. That's-
Yeah, we didn't pay those bills.
Yep.
So it's just, it was for
Oh, oh,
Amazon,
oh.
that's our vendor name is Amazon Business, so
Gotcha.
we have a business account with Amazon.
Gotcha. All right, so Article 2, are we happy with that? We want to recommend, and that's basically what we do, is recommend to the Board of Selectmen.
Right, and I can make changes based on that for our next meeting next week.
I can give you the revised numbers if you want for those stipend amounts, too.
Yeah, I'll take
Well, you said the total was like
Yeah.
45 or 48?
Yeah, so planning board stipends rather than 3,000 should be 9,000. Cemetery commission stipends instead of 1,500 should be 3,000. Board of Health stipends rather than 1,500 should be 4,500. Library trustees is correct. And recreation commission stipends should be 3,000. And then water commission salaries should be 7,500.
total or each?
That's the total
Okay.
for all
Okay,
positions.
So that 3,800 is right, because it's split. I just rounded it
Oh,
up a little
sorry.
bit, yeah.
Yeah.
So their money is just split between water and sewer, so it's half and half.
So while I fully support not waffling back and forth on this and adopting a position, we did take them out for a specific reason and don't need them for that reason anymore. So for that, I would say reinstate.
I don't have a problem with the stipends. I mean, the only thing I'm thinking about is some of these are ongoing expenses that happen every single year, and I just don't have enough, I guess, knowledge of the operating budget and kind of where we are, but it sounds like the new growth covers.
Yeah, so the difference between the raise and
and the
appropriate,
2.5.
Right.
The levy going up.
yeah, so the difference between the raise and appropriate and the free cash is the free cash was excess that we had at the end of the fiscal year that closes, that has to get approved by DOR, so that's one-time funds, that's not guaranteed every year. Whereas this raise and appropriate is basically where you're doing what it's saying, you're raising, so it's part of it's part of your levy, so that this wouldn't be this wouldn't be one-time funds, this money you have guaranteed for you next year going forward.
Yeah, essentially, the biggest wild card that we deal with is essentially the school assessment. I mean, last year, we had a 12% increase in the regional school assessment, or in the regional school assessment. That's 50% of our budget.
Right.
So, you know, to be able to project how much that's really gonna come in, over the last 5 years, the average increase has been 8% on that. So we don't know where we're gonna be yet. We know that we kind of have Dudley as, for lack of a better term, an anchor on that budget, that they have more of a fiscal need that the school needs to try to accommodate, but we're essentially tied back into those numbers.
Just during the school budget conversation that we just went through, I kept hearing, and it was alluded a couple of times, even by the Board of Selectmen, well, wait till you see next year's school budget
Yeah.
request.
And I think
Like there was
that's,
something coming down the line.
so I think that's because if you look at their budget from this year, they funded, I wanna say, this is from memory, so don't quote me, but I'm pretty sure they funded around 1.5 million from ESSER funds for staffing positions.
was.
So I think that's kind of what everyone's thinking is, well, what are you gonna do with all those? You're just gonna cut all those positions?
Right.
Or are you gonna just fund them in, because mind you, ESSER money is equal to our ARPA money, it's one time. One time it was for a couple of years, but it's basically one-time funds, it's like funding your budget with free cash. So what are they gonna do with all of those positions? So if you're funding another 1.5 into your budget for next year, on top of all these increases, just right off the bat, you're already at $1.5 million, divide that by 2, just say if it's a 50-50 split, if you divide that 1.5 in half, right off the bat, you're already starting right there for each town. That's not increasing any transportation, that's not
Right, so-
increasing any health insurance, that's not increasing any electric, nothing else, so
When
right
that
off the bat, you're
discussion
already
comes
there.
up, okay, are we gonna be coming back and say, hey, we can save $50,000 right here, or 40,000, whatever you're.
Right.
You know.
I mean,
Yeah.
we could be, we really have no,
So
I don't have a crystal ball, but,
Right.
we're still gonna remain conservative
Right.
with our new growth estimates. We know things have
Yeah.
been going well. We do see the construction going on and that, but we have to keep on, well, we at least set the initial budget, remain
Right.
conservative.
All right, I'm, you know, if you guys believe that, you know, that we'll find the money for this, I'll also propose to approve the, you know, this chart is written.
right, it doesn't mean that they
It's
have to stay, we can always, I mean,
But
I
I'll
know
be
it
the
does kinda
first one
stink,
to
but-
voice something if, come May, when we're doing budgets, and someone says, hey, we could find $50,000, and they come back to this.
right.
Um, that'll set, to me, a precedent for down the road.
Right.
Okay, and how we are always gonna be looking at these kinds of expenses.
Yeah, and I know our stipend committee worked hard to get the stipends increased to this point to keep them. So that was kind of our thought process, but everyone worked so hard to get there. Since we have it, we might as well add it back. But doesn't mean it has to stay.
It's just $50,000, and then they hear the Board of Selectmen, and I'm sorry if they're gonna take offense to this, but they quabble over the smallest amount of dollars, and then they want to pass this kind of stuff. That's my soapbox, right? We all set with this one? All right, so we know where we're gonna stand come next week. Oh, I didn't see anything else on the warrant.
No.
Did anybody else?
No, it's pretty easy this year, so.
Plus, I thought it was kind of presumptuous, whoever printed this up, that always wrote, FinCom supports this
I
motion.
know, they're in there as placeholders.
I mean-
They're in there as placeholders. We just take last year's warrant, move it to this year's warrant, just change the numbers.
Well,
It's
that's
easier to
where I kind of
format.
figured it was a bad cut and paste job.
Back to the 400K for the fire station, right? What was it? It was for some schematic.
It's basically to get us to design
Yeah.
and hiring an
And it was
OPM.
400K, not, I think you said 500K.
500 total, because
Yeah.
100,000 of that was actually from article funds that we have access to currently.
Yeah, so that doesn't need town meeting approval,
I
just the
don't
400.
mind it being in the warrant and being voted on, I just feel like lessons learned from previous, like, being wasteful, and I worry about that, and if we've done it before, and now we're gonna do it again before a vote's been passed,
To approve, right.
to approve, to spend the taxpayers'
Either
money.
under option one, option two, or option three, you're
Right.
right.
And there was a lot, and the selectmen were optimistic about getting this done, but there was a lot of conversation about how and where and the three different options we had, and I didn't feel necessarily good leaving that meeting that, everybody was on the same page. Obviously, it got moved to May, and it's just a lot of money to spend on something that's not approved, and we did it once a couple of years ago, and it was wasteful, and that's.
Good point.
Yeah, at the time, when we did the 1.4 for the public safety building, the public safety building was actually approved. Just wasn't approved for a debt exclusion. At the time, we didn't know that we could have probably funded the project under the levy limit, knowing Amazon was coming. And then I think we had voted to I think we rescinded our vote on the authorization for the public safety building, and I think, was it that same meeting we
Yeah.
had Amazon, or the next meeting we had Amazon, so.
Yeah, but at the same time, that building probably escalated above,
Right.
35 million at that point. And I think
Yeah.
that's a, kind of a thought process here as we're talking about putting money toward the schematic design, is that if we sit and do nothing for the next 6 months, then that price is probably gonna escalate just to that amount, or just that amount that we're appropriating to, the
So
schematic
that
design
scope
phase.
of work, you're saying.
Yeah.
Right, just by doing nothing, because then we're that 6 months behind the 8 ball, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but the selectmen were willing to push it off.
Ugh,
6
I'd
months.
That's
say,
kind of-
unfortunately, we weren't on our toes enough at that meeting to bring this up and
No, I
have
understand, I
that
understand.
conversation. But we're hoping that at least, we know it's a little bit of the 11th hour, but it's a pretty low bar to climb to try to at least get this project going, because I think that they would, it'll keep that escalation cost down just a little bit, and at least keep the project moving versus just sitting here and go, well, things will be different 6 months from now, other than the price.
Is there any indication that public sentiment is different for this body of work versus the public safety building?
I know at least one thing that I heard a lot about with the public safety building was issues with the site itself, and the fact that there was the perception of additional costs because of the topography. Our hope is that by moving it over to that side of the town, a smaller footprint, right in front of the schools, that we hope to kind of address some of those, because this is right on the street. There's no huge environmental obstacles that we're jumping over, and the information that we have put out, haven't really seen anybody come back and really push against it, other than the fact that, of the question, well, why aren't we just doing it as one building?
Yeah,
And
can't win.
from that
Right.
angle, it's like, well, do you want to address new facilities or address response time? Because if you don't wanna take response time into consideration, you know, that it doesn't really matter, put the biggest building you want anywhere, but I think that this is a kind of a different approach where we're strategically placing things to provide the best amount of coverage, and that actually has an impact on the residents versus just saying, oh, good, the fire department has a nice new shiny building.
Right.
I think a lot of it too is if you can get everyone on board publicly, I think that would be a lot of help too. I think the board at the time when we did the public safety building was, they had a split board that was some were for it and some were against it. I think if you get everyone that could be for it, I think that will help a lot too.
It depends on who shows up to vote.
Well, that's the thing
If
too,
if you've got the
right?
elderly coming out to vote, they're not gonna vote for it.
Right,
They just can't afford it.
right,
But the younger people,
right.
you know, it's all, it all
Right, especially if you
depends
get
on.
people that have kids right there, because that's gotta be a huge benefit. If you think about it, it's gonna be a fully staffed station, so you have a first responder there at all times, I'm gonna assume. But there's somebody there that could come into the schools and help if somebody needed something, and they're right there, and that's 2 schools, your response time's gonna be less than a minute, and you're right there.
Right,
And then you have a response time to your other school over here, it will be a lot shorter, because now they don't have to cut across Route 20. And then obviously the police station's also over here, so you have a first responder that's really close.
One of the
To all your
things that I
schools.
think is gonna throw out a red flag to everybody is this last paragraph, that to sufficiently staff the proposed building will require 6 additional
Right.
firefighters. Okay? And how's that gonna go over?
Right.
Because now we're looking at an added operating cost. Granted, it doesn't hit until fiscal year 25,
Right.
it won't fly. I
Adding
don't
6
think it will.
bodies, yeah.
I don't think it'll fly.
But
It
wait a
is
minute,
expensive, but,
my question is, why does it require, it's like the chief saying, hey, I need 3 more police cars. Oh, by the way, I need 4 more officers to drive those police cars.
yeah.
Yeah,
Why, what requires 6 additional firefighters?
So it's to maintain the staffing in 2 separate locations.
Right.
So,
You still have to
This one is
staff it.
unstaffed.
because it would still be staffed, Station 1 would still be staffed.
Right, but you
Station
have a
2 would be
minimum
staffed.
requirement at that station to staff, and then you'd have a minimum requirement on this station to be
Well,
staffed.
why don't we have a minimum requirement on this lower, this, what I'll call fire station number 2? That's unmanned, right?
Right, but that is essentially, the way that it's operated right now is that it's reserve pieces. So nothing in that building is a first out the door. You know, it's essentially, all right, we know we need the rescue. The rescue is housed down at Station 2, so, you know, somebody in a vehicle drive up and take that, and take
Right, but
that
it's not one of
vehicle.
your engines or your ambulance that's gonna be first on scene.
Yeah.
Okay. It's just, I know that question
Right.
will come up.
yeah, and I think that's kind of my point with that one, is that I had a lot of questions, like, we're not getting into the fire station tonight, right? It got moved to May, so we're not getting in tonight, and I had a lot of questions about it, and the finances, and that 6 firefighters added to the operation budget, and how we're gonna fund it, and, you know, since it got moved to May, we haven't really discussed it. I think
it's worth the discussion now, if we were gonna talk about that, a funding mechanism.
Right, because that's the big question, is, I think the town would agree to build it. The discussion, or the problem's gonna be, how do we fund it? Okay, under levy, exclusion, or my solution, Prop 2.5 override, but that ain't going anywhere, I know that, okay. So what's your biggest question?
Well, it's just,
on
it's the
funding?
concern is the putting $400,000
Okay.
towards that this year without it being farther along.
Yep.
Nothing's approved, it got moved to May, and there's a lot of open questions about
Mhm.
funding it,
Mhm.
and so that was my concern.
They had talked about putting something on the ballot in November.
So that was one of that was essentially the original proposal, was to say, put the full project on in October with the debt exclusion in November, so that way it was still fresh in mind when
Yeah.
going to the taxpayers, and you weren't really expending funds between the loan authorization portion of it and then the debt exclusion portion. But by pushing it to May, you're essentially kind of doing it in reverse order because you
Right.
have your town election before your
Town meeting.
Before your town meeting.
Right. So essentially, unless you're gonna hold another election, which is kind of silly if you ask me, but if you essentially have to have your debt exclusion vote first without having people able to talk about the project at a town meeting. But it's doable, you can't do that, it's not like it's against the law, you can do that, it's just, would you rather but if you wait till town meeting at May, and then wait for another election, you're waiting for your presidential election in November if you're not gonna hold your own election. So it's just, that pushes you that much further now down the road to be able to go out, because if we can't afford to do the project unless we're excluding something, why would we, it's, like you said, you're gonna be spending funds towards something, but now you're a whole year out. So what is the number that we have now, how much is that gonna increase in a year? Could it decrease in a year?
I also wish I heard the selectmen's, opinion on this, if it helps, if it would help, more, if it would help with public. I know they hit on some of it a little bit, but
Well, I did hear a couple of them say that if this fails, they'll never, ever talk about new buildings and forget a new police station, chief, because they just didn't have an appetite for anything. If this one thing fails, I think they're just forever gonna say, no, we'll just keep whatever we've got. And so, yeah, it becomes a timing issue because we're keyed into these dates of.
Right. And it's
Special town meeting.
definitely doable if you can publicize the information out there first. It's doable. It's not doable, but you could definitely do it. It's just you're gonna have your exclusion vote before you have a town meeting vote to discuss it. So if that fails, and then you go to town meeting and it passes, or, the debt exclusion could pass and your town meeting vote could fail. I guess it could happen anyway, but
But one
it
thing-
is nicer to talk about it, I think, in an open forum.
Yeah, one thing we did, we're talking about is one of the options, because, essentially trying to, the debt service on the building itself would be about $1 million for the first year. We just don't have that to be able to project into the operating budget 3 years from now to say that we'd be able to fit that into the total operating. So one of the approaches was to take essentially the soft cost and contingency and fund that under the levy and exclude the project itself. By doing that, you're at least putting a number on the debt exclusion vote that people will see when they do it. They'll know that they are excluding a $13 million principal amount on the project.
Right.
Versus just excluding the project in total.
Right. I think that was a lot of the gripe too, I feel, if I remember correctly, that people didn't know how much the override, or the debt exclusion was for when they went to the ballot, because there was no number there, it was just a vote. Which, if you're excluding the whole project, there doesn't need to be a number, because you could come in under that number, you could have project costs that might put you over that number. You can only go so high over, but you could come in under that number, so you don't wanna be tied to a number and an exclusion vote.
Right. And Jeremy, that's where spending the
That's
400
fair,
now.
that's fair.
Okay,
Yeah,
Gives
that's
us a-
fair.
Yeah.
good number.
It's a stepping stone, so you're not,
A better explanation.
We'd have less of a contingency. We'd have a better project cost.
you'd come in with a firmer number to town meeting and to your, and if you're gonna go if you're gonna go ballot question first, then town meeting, that might help you too, because then you'll have a firm number to go for, so you'll know what your project cost is versus your soft cost. You'll have a better number than the number that, I don't wanna say they just threw out there, obviously, cause it's just not a set number that you're gonna get if you go up for design.
And quicker between the approval and the bid process. I'm just, for an example, I was watching another town who had approved a roof project based off preliminary design only, and their estimate was like $2 million for it. By the time they got to the actual bid phase and put it out there, it came back at $4 million. So, that amount of time and the change in the market, we could have right now a good estimate of 17. And I think even a year and a half ago, I figured that this project was gonna be 13, and now we're at 17. So just that inflation in the building costs having approval, the closer to actual bidding, I think the better.
Because we even saw that, if you remember, we saw that with one of the fire vehicles. He got a number, had a quote, and then literally a month and a half later, that price went up $150, or I want to say $200,000 almost, or something like that.
Yeah,
In a month.
Vehicles are a whole other story right now, because they even signed a contract for a vehicle, and they came back and they said by the time they were able to source the chassis, that they had to increase the price.
Yeah.
Okay. So it sounds like there's nothing on the warrant that we're opposed to, right?
Are you guys in support of the funding for the fire station? So when we go forward next week?
Article 9, or what is?
Yeah, I'm gonna end up
Article
adding it in
9?
front of Article 5, yeah. Just so
Yeah.
in case it were to fail, we can, like I said, we can put it into that.
I don't think we need to take a formal vote on approval, because we're gonna do that next week.
Yeah.
And I don't want to speak for the fire chief on this, but I know that I've heard him say it before, but, you know, he'll argue that the 6 additional firefighters are ones that he needs today, and not just with a new building, that he's understaffed and doesn't have anywhere to put them. So I think that's where he would say if he were here.
All right, so we're good on what we're gonna say to the Board of Selectmen next week when we meet with them.
Sorry to ask so
Next.
many questions.
No, it's
Huh?
fine,
Sorry to ask.
No,
what we have
that's
for.
our job, right?
Figure it out.
So our next, I had a review of the Board of Selectmen's letter, and unfortunately, I have not composed it yet. That's the letter on,
The
we want
fees.
an inspector.
Yeah.
For the, I have been in touch with Kurt, and we're gonna work together on formatting that.
Okay.
I want my arguments to be good when we give it to the Board of Selectmen, right?
You did bring up in a meeting yesterday, I'm not sure if you brought this up to you, but essentially, looking for some support in instituting I think it was like a fee ad for individuals who do paper applications, because they're trying to drive people to the online portal, because it adds additional administrative burden for them to have to take the paper version and put it into the online, that they want to
Okay.
get people, they want to be able to put a carrot out there for people to be able to use that.
And like, yeah, use your credit card, that's fine, but we're gonna charge you an extra 3%.
ACH, so.
Okay. And then, one of the other action items, and I think I might have sent you a note, that inventory, the building inventory.
Oh, yeah, I meant to tell you, we've been working on it. I think we've gotten as far as some stuff in this building.
Yep.
Just getting all.
We got the HVAC and electrical and, you know, all the major stuff for this building, but I haven't gotten to branch out yet and go into
Okay.
anywhere else.
All right. So Jacqueline, you'll leave those 2 action items on the minutes, so that we'll follow up again with them,
So the letter and the
and the building
building.
inventory.
Okay.
Chief, did we cover everything you came up on?
You guys have been great. I'm
Okay.
not gonna say a word.
All right. Yeah, sometimes you get more confidence by not talking. Anybody get anything else? Keep it to 1 hour. I'm
Good
getting good
job.
at this, okay?
Ruth would be proud.
She's not here tonight because she got exposed to COVID today. So it's still out there.
It is.
Okay.
My mother and father-in-law just had it.
Well, it's coming back because the elections are coming.
Oh, is that what it is? Yeah. All right. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Definitely
Have a motion
second
and
that.
second. Discussion. There being none, all those in favor say yes.
Yes.
Opposed say no. And meeting, thank you very much.